Airports are supposed to be places of transition. People come and go, passing through like whispers on the wind. But some airports, some are different. Some hold on to the people who enter, never letting them leave. There's one airport you'll never find on a map, one that doesn't appear in any flight database. Travelers don't plan trips here. It finds them. You board your flight like any other day. You expect to land at your destination, but when the pilot's voice crackles overhead, announcing an unexpected diversion, everything changes. You look out the window. The world below is nothing but darkness, no city lights, no roads, just a vast, endless void. And then you land. The airport is eerily silent. The usual hum of activity, the chatter of passengers, the rolling of luggage, the distant PA announcements, none of it is there. The only sound is the occasional static from the overhead speakers, as if something is trying to come through, but never quite does. The air is thick, heavy, carrying a scent that's almost metallic. Your footsteps echo unnaturally as you step into the terminal, the fluorescent lights flickering just enough to cast shadows that seem to shift when you're not looking. The first thing you notice is the absence of airline logos. No flight information screens, no directional signs, just long, endless corridors lined with empty check-in counters and unmanned security stations. That's when you see them, the other passengers. They stand in small groups, talking in hushed tones. Their eyes are wide, unfocused, as if they're trying to remember something just out of reach. Some clutch their boarding passes so tightly their knuckles have turned white. Others stare at the departure screens, which display nothing but static. One woman dressed in a flight attendant's uniform stands completely still near Gate 13, her lips moving soundlessly as if reciting a script she's long since forgotten. You approach her hesitantly. "Excuse me, what is this place?" Her eyes snap to yours, her face twisting into an expression of pure terror before she whispers, "You shouldn't be here." You turn, searching for an exit, but every path you take only leads you back to where you started. The escalators move, but never reach another floor. The moving walkways stretch endlessly, yet somehow loop back to their starting point. There are no windows, no clocks. Time ceases to exist here. And then, the announcements begin. At first, it's just static, but then a voice breaks through. A voice that sounds warped, stretched, like it's being played backward. "Final boarding call for Flight 666. Passengers, please proceed to the gate." The other passengers react immediately. Some begin walking toward the gate, their steps stiff, robotic. Others look around frantically, gripping their heads as if trying to shake off a terrible memory. You feel an overwhelming urge to follow. Something deep inside you whispers that you must board that flight, that it's the only way out. But just as you take your first step, you hear it. A scraping sound, slow, methodical. Something is coming. The lights above flicker wildly now, casting jagged, shifting shadows on the walls. But then you realize they're not shadows. They're moving. They twist and curl like living things, stretching toward the passengers who are too far gone to notice. One by one, they disappear into the blackness. No screams, no struggle. Just silence. The flight attendant turns to you one last time, her eyes hollow, her voice distant. You have to choose. Your heart pounds. Stay here and fade into nothingness, or board a flight with no destination? You look down at the boarding pass in your hand, though you don't remember ever receiving it. The ink shifts as you stare, the letters forming words you can barely comprehend. Flight 000, seat nowhere, departure time. Your fingers tremble as you step closer to the gate. And then you walked into the terminal. Then suddenly you are back again, where you had started in the Erie airport. How every this time there was a logos of Black Ridge International Airport and passengers moving about. The last time we were here, something unnatural stirred within the shadows of Black Ridge International Airport. Passengers vanished. Employees whispered of shadows that moved without bodies, of voices over the intercom that didn't belong to the living. But if you thought the nightmare ended there, oh, you were so very wrong. The night shift workers who survived the last incident were never the same. Those who remained refused to step near Terminal 13, swearing they could hear something breathing beneath the tiles. But when the airport reopened, flights resumed, and so did the disappearances. A new janitor, Miguel, had heard the stories, but he needed the job. He avoided the terminal until one night his supervisor forced him to clean the empty gates. "Just a quick wipe down," they said. "You'll be fine." But Miguel wasn't fine. No one ever is. At first, it was just a sound. Faint, distant. A child laughing, though no flights had arrived, and the waiting area was empty. Then he saw it. Footprints, wet, glistening footprints, trailing from the closed jet bridge. There shouldn't have been a flight arriving. The doors should have been locked, but they weren't. The security feed later showed Miguel standing there, staring into the jet bridge, frozen. Then he stepped inside, and just like that, he was gone. The airport staff found his mop, his radio, but Miguel was never seen again. The strange part, his punch-out time was recorded 7 hours later. Black Ridge International should have shut down, but money keeps it running, and fear keeps the truth buried. Flights continue. People still arrive, and some never leave. Final shot. An overhead airport announcement plays, distorted and unsettling. "Attention passengers. Flight 066 is now boarding. If you have been chosen, you will know. Please proceed to the gate immediately." Miguel was gone, swallowed by the jet bridge. The footage showed nothing but static after his last step. No screams, no struggle, just emptiness. But then something changed. A new mystery, a new horror. Gate 66 was sealed. Miguel's disappearance had made sure of that. Yet, a week later, a flight appeared on the departure board. Flight 066. No airline, no destination, just on time. The gate? 66 inches. Airport staff stand in confusion, staring at the screen. One of them tries to delete the flight from the system, but it reappears instantly. No one scheduled this flight. No plane was on record. No passengers had checked in. But at 3:15 a.m., the status changed from on time to boarding. A guard was sent to investigate. Officer Daniels, a seasoned employee, not one to believe in ghost stories. But the moment he stepped into that terminal, he knew something was wrong. The empty gate stretches before him. The scent of jet fuel lingers, but there's no plane outside, just darkness beyond the windows. Then, footsteps. He heard them, soft where slow, not behind him, but ahead, from inside the jet bridge. Daniels raises his flashlight, shining it into the darkness. The bridge is empty, but the air is heavy, charged, like something unseen is waiting. The radio on his hip crackled, static. Then, a voice, faint, familiar. Miguel, whispering over radio, "Don't let them board." Daniel's blood ran cold. Miguel was gone, missing for over a week. His radio had been found in the lost and found. This was impossible. Daniels turns to run. Too late. The gate intercom clicks on with an eerie, hollow announcement. Airport intercom. Flight 066 is now boarding. Passengers, please proceed to the gate. Daniels stumbles back as shadowy figures appear in the jet bridge. Dozens of them, standing, motionless, faceless shapes, waiting. And then they move. No one knows what happened next. Daniels was never seen again. But the strangest part? The next morning, Flight 066 had changed its status once more. Flight 066 now reads, departed. But to where? And who was on board? A blurry figure in an airport reflection. A whispering voice, barely audible. The flight is full, but there's always room for more. A dark, stormy night. Heavy rain pelts the runway. The control tower is alive with radio chatter. For weeks, the disappearances at Blackridge International had gone unanswered. Terminal 13 was nearly abandoned. But at 2:47 a.m., the silence was broken. A new horror arrived. From the sky, in the air traffic control room, blinking monitors, a frantic controller leans into his radio, his voice sharp with confusion. Blackridge Tower to incoming aircraft. Identify yourself. You are not on the scheduled arrivals. Repeat, identify. Then a garbled transmission, a voice, distant, hollow. 066, requesting, clearance, landing. Flight 066. It had vanished without a trace. Yet here it was, requesting landing clearance. But something was wrong. No flight plan, no transponder signal, no response beyond those 3 chilling words. Controllers exchange uneasy glances. Outside, the rain beats harder against the glass windows. The runway lights flicker. No one knew where this plane had come from, but it was coming, whether they liked it or not. A plane appears through the fog, old, outdated. The paint is faded, the airline logo unrecognizable. The wheels touch down with an eerie smoothness. No turbulence, no sound except the hum of the engines. It landed flawlessly, too flawlessly, like it had done this countless times before. Security teams rushing to the plane as it rolls to a stop. The jet bridge extends, but the doors remain closed. No movement inside. The airport security officer, radio. Flight 066, do you copy? We are preparing to board. The door creaks, then slowly unlocks. They expected frightened passengers, a terrified crew, but inside, there was nothing. No pilots, no flight attendants, no passengers. Every seat was pristine, every tray table locked. The plane looked untouched, except for one thing. On the cockpit door, scratched, clawed at, as if someone or something had tried to escape. The security officers exchange nervous glances. One reaches for the cockpit handle, slowly turns it. The door was unlocked, and inside, every control light is blinking erratically. The seats are empty, but the radio, it's still transmitting. They hear a crackling noise, then a voice, faint, distant. Pilot, whispering over the radio. We never landed. We never left. Help us. Please. The transmission cuts. The lights flicker. Then, the cockpit screens all change at once, displaying just 2 words. Next departure. As the security officers go to leave, they see, or a split second, a blurry figure appears in the last row, sitting still, watching. In airport security office, there is a cluster of officers watch the plane on multiple screens. The lead officer, Carter, rubs his temples. He's been on the job for 20 years, but he's never seen anything like this. By all logic, Flight 066 shouldn't have existed. No record of its departure, no sign of its passengers. And yet, there it was, silent, waiting. But not for long. Security Officer Carter chimes up. We need to tow it. Call maintenance. This thing is giving me the creeps. A junior officer points to one of the screens. Sir, look at the windows. They see on the screen the plane's passenger windows are dark, lifeless. Then, movement. A shadow shifts in one of the seats. Then another and another. But when the cameras zoom in, the seats are empty again. There were no passengers, no crew, so why did the shadows inside move like there were? At the airport tarmac, two maintenance workers approached the plane. Their flashlights cut through the thick fog. One of them, Logan, reaches for the fuselage, pressing his gloved hand against the cold metal. It's freezing, way too cold for a plane that just landed. The second worker, Harris, climbs the stairs to the jet bridge. He pauses at the open door, peering inside. Hello? Anyone still here? His voice echoes inside the hollow cabin. The silence is thick, suffocating. Then, just barely audible, he hears breathing. Not his own, not Logan's, something else, deep, slow, coming from the cockpit. Harris steps inside. The sound of his boots on the floor is the only noise. He inches toward the cockpit door, reaching out, when suddenly, blackout. Every light in the airport flickers. Security cameras glitch. The entire plane vanishes from the monitors. And just like that, Flight 066 was gone. In the security office, the officers scramble as every screen goes dark, then reboots. The plane is no longer on the tarmac. Security officer Carter panicked. Where the hell did it go? Someone get eyes on the runway. Outside, the fog is still thick. The maintenance stairs are still there. The jet bridge remains. But the plane completely vanished. Only a shallow indent in the wet pavement remains where its wheels once sat. A plane doesn't just disappear, not in an airport full of cameras, not in the middle of the night, but Flight 066 did. Harris, the missing maintenance worker. His radio was found lying on the ground at Gate 66, still transmitting static. His ID badge is discovered in the cockpit of a plane that no longer exists. Now on the airport departure board, Flight 066 no longer reads departed. Instead, the status has changed again. Next arrival, unknown. Once again on the airport intercom. Now boarding. Final call for all passengers. A busy airport terminal. The morning rush underway. People move through security, coffee in hand, luggage rolling behind them. Normal, mundane. But something isn't right. The night before, a plane vanished. A maintenance worker went missing. Flight 066 had come and gone. But the airport didn't shut down. It never does. Because fear is easy to bury beneath schedules and ticket sales. But one man, he couldn't ignore it. Because the horror had found him. Jason, a weary businessman in his late 30s, seated at Gate 22, scrolling through emails. He sips his coffee, barely paying attention as his flight number is called for boarding. But then, he notices something in his lap. A crisp boarding pass, placed perfectly on top of his briefcase. But he didn't print one. He never took it out. And yet, there it is. A boarding pass, but not for his flight. On the pass, bold black letters reading, Flight 066, Seat 13A, departure now. Jason frowns, flipping it over. The paper feels wrong. Too smooth, too cold. Jason muttered, "What the hell?" He looks around. Did someone drop it? A prank? No one's paying attention to him. The gate agent calls for final boarding, but not for Flight 066. His flight, his real flight, and yet he couldn't ignore it. His hands trembled as he ran his thumb over the ticket's barcode. And that's when he noticed the final chilling detail. On the bottom of the ticket, passenger name, Jason Marshall. Jason whispered, No, I didn't book this. I didn't." He shoves the pass into his pocket, heart pounding. A mistake, a glitch, has to be. But then, over the airport intercom, distorted, echoing across the terminal. Final boarding call for Flight 066. Passenger Jason Marshall, please proceed to Gate 66 immediately. Jason freezes. The room around him feels off. The chatter dulls, the lights seem dimmer, and then the departure board overhead. Flights flicker and update. His real flight disappears from the list, and in its place, only one flight remains, Flight 066, boarding. Jason stands abruptly, looking around. No one else reacts. No one hears the intercom call his name. No one sees the flight list change. It's just him. Jason had two choices: ignore the ticket, walk away, or find out what happens when you board a flight that shouldn't exist. Jason, gripping the boarding pass, hesitantly stepping toward the dark, distant Gate 66. His breathing is shaky, eyes darting. But as he nears the gate, the sounds of the airport fade completely. But before he could take another step, his phone buzzed. A new message. Jason looks down at his screen. The message has no sender, just 4 words. "Don't get on board." Jason's wide eyes, heart racing. He looks up. Gate 66 is now just ahead. The door is open. The jet bridge yawns before him, an abyss of unnatural darkness. And from inside, something is waiting. The sound of an airport announcement echoes one last time. "This is your final boarding call. Passenger Jason Marshall, step forward, now." Jason stands at Gate 66, the mysterious boarding pass gripped in his shaking hand. The jet bridge stretches before him, swallowed in unnatural darkness. His phone still buzzes in his pocket, a final desperate warning: "Don't get on board." Jason could have walked away. He could have turned back. But something about the gate pulled at him, like invisible hands gripping his shoulders, urging him forward. And then, the decision was no longer his to make. Jason's foot stepping onto the jet bridge. The moment he does, the air thickens, like wading through unseen water. His ears ring. The lights flicker overhead. Behind him, the terminal is gone. There is no turning back now. He takes another step, then another. The walls around him seem to stretch, distorting, growing impossibly long. The distant sound of a jet engine hums, not from outside, but from beneath him. Then he reaches the open door of the plane. Inside, the cabin was wrong. The air smelled sterile, artificial, like something trying to mimic the scent of a real aircraft. The seats, rows upon rows, were pristine, but not empty. Jason freezes. Every seat is occupied, but the passengers aren't moving. Their faces are pale and expressionless. Their eyes are open, unblinking. Their skin stretched too tightly over their skulls, like wax figures frozen mid-thought. The silence is suffocating. Then, one of the passengers jerks slightly, their head twitching too fast, too unnatural. Jason stumbles backward, and then the intercom crackles to life. "Welcome aboard Flight 066, non-stop, to the other side." The cabin lights flicker violently. The plane groans. Jason spins, ready to run, but the door is gone. The jet bridge is gone. Only the void of night presses against the sealed windows. There was no escape, because the moment he stepped on board, Jason was no longer in the airport. He was somewhere else, somewhere that had been waiting for him. Jason breathing heavily, turning toward the cockpit. Maybe the pilots can explain. Maybe they can stop this. He pushes through the heavy door. Inside, the cockpit is empty. The controls are dark. The windows show nothing but swirling blackness outside. Then, on the control panel, a single screen flickers on. A flight log appears. Jason leans in, reading the last recorded entry. "Flight 066, arrival confirmed, manifest, 1 new passenger." Jason's blood runs cold. He scrolls through the log. Hundreds of previous flights, hundreds of names. Each entry lists 1 new passenger. And then, as his shaking hands scroll further, he sees Miguel's name, then Officer Daniels, Then Harris, the maintenance worker. Every missing person from Terminal 13. It had never been about the plane. It had never been about the passengers. Flight 066 was a vessel, a collector, and Jason, he was just the latest addition. They stand in small groups, talking in hushed tones. Their eyes are wide, unfocused, as if they're trying to remember something just out of reach. Some clutch their boarding passes so tightly their knuckles have turned white. Others stare at the departure screens, which display nothing but static. Behind him, a noise, the sound of a seatbelt clicking into place. Jason spins around. His seat, 13A, is now occupied. It's him, a perfect, lifeless copy of himself, staring straight ahead, hands resting neatly in his lap. Jason in a trembling whisper, "I'm trapped." The intercom crackles one last time. "Please fasten your seatbelt. We are preparing for departure." Jason clawing at the cockpit door, screaming, but it won't open. The plane shakes, the lights flash violently, and then everything goes black. The next morning, Black Ridge International Airport. The sun rises. The terminal is bustling as if nothing ever happened. A janitor mops the floor near Gate 66. The departure board is normal. Everything is normal. No one noticed Flight 066 was gone. No one remembered Jason Marshall, because no one ever does. A businessman sitting at Gate 22. He sets his coffee down, stretches, then freezes. Something is in his lap. A boarding pass. Crisp. Perfect. The name on the ticket? His own. Because Flight 066 always finds its next passenger. The forgotten asylum. Dark secrets linger within. They say some places never truly die. The walls may crumble, the doors may rot. But the memories, oh, the memories, they fester. Deep in the heart of Blackwood pines, hidden beneath the overgrowth and forgotten by time, stands Ravenhurst Asylum. Once a beacon of hope for the mentally ill, now just a decaying husk, filled with the echoes of the lost and the damned. No one dares step inside anymore, not after what happened to the last group that tried. Some claim it's just superstition, that the stories are nothing but cautionary tales meant to keep out the curious. But those who've gone in, well, not all of them came back. And the ones who did, let's just say they weren't the same. It was built in 1923, a place meant for healing, for treatment. But those who entered rarely left better than they came. Patients whispered of cruel experiments, of shadowy figures that moved in the halls at night, of screams that didn't belong to the living. Doctors who worked there were said to have gone mad themselves. And then, in 1968, the asylum was abruptly shut down. No explanation, no records, just abandoned overnight. But something remained. In the decades that followed, strange things started happening. Hikers vanishing near the asylum grounds. Trespassers found wandering the woods, dazed, speaking in languages they never knew. One man, a thrill seeker, live-streamed his visit. His camera kept rolling long after he started screaming. The feed cut to black. Authorities found his phone outside the asylum gates, screen cracked, battery dead. His body never recovered. And then there's the legend of Dr. Elias Mercer, a pioneer in experimental treatments, or, as the rumors say, a monster in a lab coat. He believed that true healing required breaking the mind first. He vanished the same night the asylum closed, leaving behind only his journal, pages filled with ramblings about voices from beyond and something watching from the walls. But the most terrifying part? His office door. To this day, it remains locked, untouched by time, rust, or decay. Some say if you knock 3 times and whisper his name, you'll hear a whisper back. A few months ago, a group of urban explorers decided to spend the night inside. They planned to debunk the stories, To prove that Ravenhurst was nothing but an old, empty building, they filmed everything, their laughter, their mockery, until they found the basement. Their footage was recovered a week later, found in the hands of a woman who had been missing for 10 years. She was rocking back and forth, whispering, "It's still hungry." Only one of the explorers made it out. He refuses to speak about what happened, but sometimes, in the dead of night, he's found standing outside the asylum gates, whispering to something inside. On a crackling radio transmission you can hear distorted voices muttering fragments of words. Not alone, watching, don't trust. In an old abandoned security room, you can see a surveillance monitor showing grainy footage of a darkened hallway. A shadow moves just out of frame. But what if the stories are wrong? What if the asylum was never abandoned? What if something or someone has been waiting? 2 weeks ago, a team of researchers entered the asylum, determined to document its history. They carried state-of-the-art equipment, infrared cameras, and motion detectors. They believed science could explain the unexplainable. But what they found was something science had no words for. They found a journal with its pages filled with frantic handwriting. "We were wrong. It sees. It knows. It's coming." The researchers set up their base in what was once the patient intake room. Strange things happened almost immediately. Their equipment malfunctioned. Batteries drained in seconds. And then, in the middle of the night, the monitors began recording movement, footsteps echoing down the empty hallways. And then, the knocking started. It was a slow knock. 1, 2, 3. The knocks echoed through the darkness. One of the researchers, a woman named Dr. Keller, followed the sound to the locked office of Dr. Elias Mercer. The door, it was open. What she saw inside changed everything. Inside was dimly lit office, with dust-covered papers scattered across the desk, with a single leather chair that sat in the middle of the room, facing the wall. As she turned to leave, the chair turned on its own. She hears a breathy whisper, "Welcome back." On the security camera, the feed flickers to life. The screen shows the researchers, only their faces are blurred, their bodies distorted as if the camera refuses to capture their true forms. The footage was found 2 days later, buried beneath the debris of the asylum's east wing. It shouldn't have been possible. No one had been in that part of the building for decades. Yet there it was, the last recording of Dr. Keller and her team. On the footage, you can see a researcher standing motionless, staring into the darkness, her mouth moving as if speaking, yet no sound comes out. One by one, they disappeared. The first vanished without a trace. The second was found in the basement, whispering to something in the shadows. The third left a message scrawled across the asylum walls, written in something dark and thick. "It's awake." The screen remained silent for a moment, until faintly, the sound of slow, labored breathing emerges. And then, the new voices started. Some say you can now see a lone flashlight beam illuminating the entrance of Ravenhurst Asylum. The door is no longer ajar. It's wide open. From within, distorted voices whisper in unison, an unintelligible chant growing louder. The screen distorts violently. Someone, or something, is coming. Days passed, and the research team's disappearance remained a mystery. Authorities refused to enter the asylum, claiming jurisdictional complications, yet whispers spread of something darker, something keeping them out. Then a new piece of evidence surfaced, a worn, blood-specked cassette tape that was found at the asylum gates. The label reads, "Keller, Final Transmission." The tape was delivered anonymously. No fingerprints, no signs of tampering, just waiting to be played. The investigators click the play button. A voice, Dr. Keller's. Shaky, frantic, she whispers, "If anyone finds this, We made a mistake. I made a mistake. It isn't just watching, it's learning. It knows we're here, and it doesn't want us to leave. They hear a distant knock 3 times, then a slow, rasping breath in the background. Dr. Keller starts sobbing. Whatever you do, don't open the... They hear a deafening screech, then silence. Then you can hear Dr. Keller whispering, "It's real. Oh God, it's real." We heard the knocking first, 3 times, always 3 times. We thought it was the wind, but then the doors. The doors started opening on their own. The lights, no power, but they flickered, showing us things we shouldn't have seen. And Mercer. Mercer isn't gone. He's watching us. He's in the walls. You can hear silence once again. Then a scraping sound, something breathing in the background. Then you can hear an unknown voice, low, gurgling. A wet whisper, "Welcome home." The tape ends there. No signs of struggle. No evidence of an attack. Just an unfinished warning and an open door. The asylum now has a reporter stands outside the asylum gates, her voice tense. The reporter announces, authorities have confirmed that the research team, led by Dr. Keller, is officially missing. Their last known location was inside Ravenhurst Asylum. Search teams have been dispatched, but so far, no one knows what happened to Dr. Keller. No one dares enter Ravenhurst anymore. Not after the last officer to step inside was found outside the asylum gates the next morning. His uniform soaked in water, his fingernails broken and bloodied as if he had tried to claw his way out of something. The problem? It hadn't rained in weeks. Years go by before a new group of explorers, urban legends enthusiasts, stand outside Ravenhurst, filming with a handheld camera. They always come, the curious fools, the ones who think the past is just a story. But some stories refuse to stay buried. The first explorer exclaims, "Dude, this place is insane. They say no one's been inside for years." The second explorer replies, "Then why is the front door open?" Holding the camera and shakily zooms in on the heavy asylum doors that had been rusted shut for decades, now stand slightly ajar. A cold breeze hisses through the gap. What they don't know is that the doors of Ravenhurst don't just open. They let you in. Not everything trapped in Ravenhurst was human. The asylum is waking up, and it's hungry. The explorers who entered Ravenhurst thought they would uncover its secrets, but secrets have a way of swallowing those who seek them. Time doesn't move the same way inside Ravenhurst. It bends, it warps, it loops, and now it's breaking. The asylum breathes. The walls expand and contract like lungs inhaling the stale, rotting air. Something moves in the corridors, not walking, not crawling, gliding just beyond the camera's reach. And the voices, they're getting louder. A deep, rattling breath echoes from behind them. They spin. Nothing is there. Then the breath comes again, closer. The first explorer whispered, "Did you hear that?" The second explorer replied, "No, but I feel it." The screen on their camera distorts and starts flickering violently. For a brief moment, an emaciated figure with hollow black eyes is seen watching them from the end of the hallway. Then, darkness. The search party was supposed to find Dr. Keller and her team, but what they found instead found them first. A police dispatcher listens to a garbled distress call. The signal crackles, punctuated by static and distant screams. "Help us. The doors won't open. The lights. Something's here. It knows we're listening." The dispatcher frowns, trying to adjust the frequency. The screaming stops abruptly. They say sound can linger in a place long after the source is gone. But the screams from Ravenhurst don't fade. They adapt. The radio crackles, playing back the distress call. But now, the voice is different. It's familiar. It's the dispatcher's own voice. Years later, yet again, a new group of urban explorers standing at the rusted gates of Ravenhurst Asylum. Their handheld cameras shake slightly in the cold, unnatural breeze. They've heard the stories, the disappearances, the voices on lost recordings, but that only fuels their curiosity. They aren't the first to step inside Ravenhurst, and they won't be the last. One explorer, a young woman named Jess, hesitates at the threshold, shining her flashlight into the yawning darkness. The first explorer, David excited, whispered, "Dude, this is insane. This place is a gold mine for our channel." The second explorer, Tina, nervous, laughed. "If we make it out, that is." A gust of wind slams the doors open wider. A deep, hollow breath escapes from inside. The group steps forward. The explorers navigate the decayed hallways, dust motes swirling in their flashlight beams. Their footsteps echo, except there's an extra set. Jess whispered, "Did you hear that?" The third explorer, Tommy, replied, "Probably a rat." They come to a door at the end of the corridor that creaks open by itself. The air turns colder, a grand crumbling staircase. A mural stretches along the walls, once depicting the asylum's founding doctors, now distorted by age and something else. Their painted eyes seem to follow the explorers as they ascend. David whispered, "I swear those weren't looking at us before." Tina nervously replied, "Let's just keep moving." Their camera catches movement at the top of the stairs, a shadowy figure standing unnaturally still. The light flickers. When it stabilizes, the figure is gone. The explorers find an old patient room. On the bed, dust-covered restraints still hold the impression of something, or someone, that once struggled there. Jess points to the wall. There's something written on the wall. She wipes away the grime, revealing deep scratches in the paint. The words, "We never left." A distant, distorted chuckle fills the air. The group stands outside a rusted elevator, its doors barely held together by time. An old sign reads, "Sublevel C, restricted." Tommy looking confused. No way. That place isn't even on the blueprints. The buttons start pressing themselves. Then the doors groan open, revealing a darkness that seems to stretch forever. Jess hesitantly, "We shouldn't go down there." David nudges her. "Come on, just a quick look." They step inside and the doors slam shut. The floor number begins descending, past any known level. The elevator shakes violently as it continues its descent. The explorers clutch the rusted handrails, their breath shallow as the dim overhead light flickers erratically. The elevator shudders to a halt, but the doors remain closed. Jess presses the open button repeatedly, her fingers trembling. Jess frantically whispering, "Come on, come on." The doors slowly groan open. A gust of warm, foul-smelling air rushes inside. Their flashlights cut through the thick darkness, revealing a narrow corridor stretching endlessly forward. David looking around. What the hell is this place? The walls were damp, pulsing slightly, as if the asylum itself were alive. Faint whispers slither through the air, indistinct at first. But then, the explorers' names were spoken. Tina looking at the others. "Okay, I don't like this. We should go back." Tommy turns, pressing the elevator button. The doors remain open. The floor number display flashes symbols that don't belong to any known language. The explorers push forward, their footsteps echoing unnaturally in the silence. They pass abandoned gurneys, overturned filing cabinets, and faded signs that list experimental procedures long outlawed. Jess, reading a plaque on the wall, "Cognitive Reconstruction Ward." They stand in front of a rusted metal door slightly ajar. Something inside moves, a scraping, shuffling sound. A wet breath exhales. Tommy shaking his head, "Nope, nope, we are not going in there." The door swings open violently, revealing a long, darkened room lined with rusted operating tables. Restraints hang loosely from the sides, still swaying as if they had just been used. As they continue in, they come to a hallway filled with decayed patient files strewn across the floor. The group sifts through them, their gloved hands brushing against brittle paper. Tina exclaims, "These are recent." They come to a file labeled Subject 12. The attached photo is distorted, but the eyes, hollow black voids, are unmistakable. The name field reads Tommy L. before the rest is scratched out. Tommy backing away. What the hell? That's not funny, guys. The light flickers. A wet footprint appears on the tile floor behind him. Jess shaky whispered, "Tommy, don't move." Their camera glitching in and out, showing the explorers standing in the hallway. But there's something wrong. In the footage, there is an extra figure among them. A tall, gaunt silhouette, standing motionless between David and Jess. Its head twitches slightly, then snaps toward the camera. The group sprints down the hallway, panic setting in. The shadows around them stretch and distort, reaching out like grasping fingers. The camera shakes wildly. Jess, gasping, "The elevator! Run!" They reach the elevator just as the doors begin to close. Tommy stumbles forward, nearly falling. Jess grabs his arm, yanking him inside. The doors slam shut just as something heavy slams against them from the other side. The group stands in stunned silence, panting. The elevator begins to ascend, the distorted floor numbers counting upward. But something is wrong. They are passing floors that shouldn't exist. David, whispering, Why is it still going?" The light flickers. The elevator slows. The doors crack open slightly, revealing a dimly lit hallway with pristine white walls. The asylum is brand new. Footsteps approach from the other side. Jess cautiously reaches out to touch the smooth white walls. Her fingers brush over what feels like fresh paint until her skin meets something wet. She pulls her hand back. It's smeared in crimson. Jess, trembling. This isn't paint. David kneels, running a hand along the floor. The tile beneath him quivers as though it were something alive. A low hum vibrates through the hallway, growing louder with each passing second. Tommy, panicked whisper, "Do you hear that?" The hum morphs into whispers, overlapping voices speaking in urgent, frantic tones. Some beg, others laugh. Tina, trembling, "Where the hell are we?" As they walk down the hall, that had doors line either side, each with a numbered plaque. As they move past them, one door creaks open, revealing a dimly lit patient room. The bed is made. A set of restraints lie open, waiting. The group ventures deeper. The further they go, the more distorted the surroundings become. The once pristine walls now flicker between fresh and rotting. The floor beneath them shifts, at times appearing as aged, cracked linoleum, then reverting to spotless white tile. David, frustrated, "We need to find a way out." Now they reach what appears to be a nurse's station. Old files are scattered across the desk, some pages impossibly blank, others filled with scribbled notes. Jess picks one up, her breath hitching. Jess, reading shakily, admitted, "David M., Tina C., Jessica L., Thomas L." She stops, her eyes widening. This is us. A chill ripples through the group as they exchange fearful glances. How can you escape when you were already admitted? A loud buzzing fills the air. The overhead fluorescent lights flicker violently, casting distorted shadows along the walls. From one of the open rooms, something moves, a shape barely glimpsed, lurking just out of sight. Tina, whispering, "We're not alone." Tommy turns his camera toward the room. The screen distorts with static, But for a split second, a gaunt, hollow-eyed figure is seen standing just behind them, watching. Then it's gone. Tommy, frantically checking the camera feed. Tell me you saw that. David looks at the others. We need to move. Now, the group stumbles into what looks like a surgical theater. The observation windows above are shattered, and the operating table in the center is covered in aged, dried blood. Strangely, the overhead surgical light still glows faintly. Jess looking around, this place isn't abandoned. It's waiting. A sudden metallic screech echoes through the room. The door they entered through slams shut behind them. From the opposite side of the room, another door creaks open. Beyond it, darkness. The explorers turn to flee, but the walls begin to shift, the room warping around them. The floor tiles peel away, revealing cold, rusted metal beneath. The surgical lights flicker off, plunging them into near darkness. Footsteps echo from the hall, approaching fast. Jess, desperately whispering, "We have to run." The shadows twist unnaturally, stretching toward them. The whispers grow louder, now a deafening chorus of voices. The camera feed glitches wildly, cutting in and out. Tina cried out, "The doors! They're gone!" A deep, guttural breath is heard behind them. The whispers have grown into a chorus of agonized voices, overlapping, incoherent, desperate. No one leaves Ravenhurst, not unless it lets them. The explorers are trapped. The shadows stretch unnaturally, closing in around them. The sound of dragging footsteps echoes from every direction. David, panting frantically. There has to be another way out. Jess spins in a circle, her flashlight beam flickering wildly over the walls. The surgical equipment is rusted, long abandoned. But then, in the flickering light, they see it. Bloody handprints, fresh and wet, smeared along the operating table as though something had just been restrained there. Tina whispered, "Someone's here." Tommy's camera screen glitches violently, freezing on a frame that none of them can see. A figure, impossibly tall, its hollow eyes locked onto them. Then, static. They are not alone, and they never were. The group sprints down the corridor, retracing their steps. But the hallways are no longer the same. The nurse's station is gone. The walls are lined with numbered doors, each with a small rusted viewing hatch. A low hum vibrates through the air, growing stronger. Jess, panic. "This isn't where we came from." David grabs a door handle and wrenches it open. Inside, the room is pristine, untouched by time. A single hospital bed sits in the center, restraints dangling from the sides. The fluorescent light above buzzes, and then the bed shifts. A figure lies beneath the thin white sheet. Tommy, shaking his head, stepping back. No, we're not doing this, but it's too late." The sheet twitches. Then, in one sudden motion, it is yanked away, revealing a decayed skeletal patient strapped to the bed. Its hollow eye sockets snap open. Its mouth stretches into a ragged, soundless scream. The explorers flee, the hallway shifting around them, twisting, leading them in circles. The floor beneath them pulses as though something massive stirs beneath it. The lights overhead flicker erratically, plunging them into darkness between flashes. And then, in the strobing light, they see it. A figure, tall, motionless, watching. Then another, and another, and another. Silent skeletal figures emerging from the rooms, their hollow eyes locked onto the living intruders. Tina, sobbing, barely breathing. "No, this isn't real. This isn't real." The whispers rise into a deafening chorus. The figures begin to move, not walking, gliding forward, their gaping mouths widening. The explorers back up, nowhere to go, the walls pressing in, the air thick with decay. Jess screaming, "We need to wake up." Tommy turns his camera to the ceiling. Above them, In the flickering light, something massive stirs in the darkness. The ceiling isn't a ceiling at all. It is flesh, and it is breathing. Ravenhurst doesn't just trap its victims, it swallows them whole. A single door slams open at the end of the hallway. A blinding white light spills out, cutting through the shadows. Without hesitation, the group runs toward it, their screams lost in the deafening roar of voices behind them. The moment they cross the threshold darkness, they suddenly hear a sound of a heart monitor beeping steadily. A blurry image of a hospital room fades in. The explorers now lie in separate beds, IVs hooked into their arms, and a doctor stands over them, clipboard in hand, watching. Doctor eerily states, "You were in an accident, but don't worry, you're safe now." Jess's eyes flutter open. The moment she sees the doctor's face, her breath catches in her throat. His hollow, empty eyes stare back at her. A slow, unnatural smile stretches across his lips. Now Ravenhurst awaits its next patient,